January 15, 2016, Al-Shabaab militants overran a Kenyan base. The details of what happened next are gruesome as they are pulled from the enemy's own propaganda. My interest in this story extends beyond the attack itself. It's about the cascade of failures that made it possible, from a base that was a death trap to broken alliances with local clans to a rescue mission that never came. And after the dust settled, an official silence so profound that the families of the fallen were left searching for answers their own government refused to give. Almost a decade later, all we are left with are unanswered questions, a propaganda video from the enemy, and a trail of operational failures. This is the story of why the Kenya Defense Forces lost the Battle of El Adde. The El-Adde base was a sitting duck. The soldiers in the camp were new. Al-Shabaab was aware that 200 Kenya Defense Forces troops had arrived in El-Adde just 2 weeks earlier. They knew that with that time, the new troops had not fully understood the land. Besides, the camp itself was huge, much too big for a company plus formation to adequately defend. Defending a territory this big with only 200 men was like trying to guard a castle with a handful of soldiers. The camp was also isolated. The closest friendly forces were not even other Kenyans. They were Ethiopian troops, part of a different national contingent in the same mission. What added salt to the wound was the poor relationship between the Kenya Defense Forces soldiers and the locals, specifically the dominant Marihan clan. The Kenyan government aligned itself with and assisted tribes that had stolen Marihan's jewel city and killed their kin. As a result, the Marihan clan's resentment of Kenyan soldiers began to deepen. The locals were against Kenyans. On the other hand, the Somali National Army knew Al-Shabaab's plans since the Somali National Army base was empty at the time of the attack. Nobody knows whether the Somali National Army alerted the Kenyan Defense Forces at El-Adde before fleeing their camp. If at all, the Kenya Defense Forces got the warning of a potential Al-Shabaab attack, their defeat can only be attributed to two things. One, the garrison was either unable to detect Al-Shabaab's forces as they assembled to launch the attack, and two, the KDF did detect them but was unable to respond effectively. The attack began before dawn, using a tactic Al-Shabaab had perfected in 2 previous assaults on other African Union bases. It started with a massive vehicle bomb. Al-Shabaab used 3 vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices to breach the camp's defenses. Then, hundreds of fighters swarmed. But here's the crucial question. Did the Kenya Defense Forces get warnings of the attack? The commander of Somali troops in the region, General Abbas Ibrahim Gurey, claimed that the commander of KDF troops at El-Adde was warned of a possible attack hours before the battle. The question is, if they knew an enemy was planning an attack against them, why did they not plan a counterattack? How could Al-Shabaab overcome them with such ease? Something must have gone wrong somewhere. A Western diplomat in Mogadishu called it a tactical disaster. He could not understand how just 200 Al-Shabaab could walk across a field in broad daylight without the Kenyans noticing. And where were the KDF's machine guns? The base's flimsy defenses were useless. The outer perimeter was just thorn bushes and barbed wire. Al-Shabaab fighters simply threw a tarpaulin over the razor wire before jumping over it. The KDF defenses were a joke to Al-Shabaab militants, and the result was chaos. As the base was being overrun, a desperate race began to send help, but there was no cavalry coming. AMISOM did not have the necessary capacity to assist the KDF troops in El-Adde. The international mission had no rapid reaction force, no rescue helicopters either. So, help had to come from Kenyan troops driving in from the border, over 100 kilometers away. And Al-Shabaab was waiting for them too. They had predicted that after their attack on El-Adde, Kenya would try to send in backup from places like Mandera and El-Wak. Al-Shabaab predicted and was prepared for such a response. They had laid IEDs on the route and ambushed the rescue column. The rescuers were ambushed on their way to the rescue. For days, the survivors at El-Adde were on their own. The base was only reclaimed more than 72 hours after the incident. All this time, AMISOM was strangely quiet. AMISOM said nothing about why there were no reinforcements from any of the other AMISOM camps. The Kenyan soldiers were not just defeated in a battle, they were abandoned by the very system that sent them there. The rescue mission itself became a tragic part of the failure, highlighting a catastrophic breakdown in planning and coordination. After a disaster of this scale, most governments honor their dead and demand accountability. The Kenyan government did the exact opposite. They erected a wall of silence. After the battle, there has been no national day of mourning, no roll call of honor, and no explanation. Instead of answers, the Kenyan government gave families silence and quietly returned coffins. As if that was enough, the government clamped down. Journalists were arrested for posting casualty numbers online. The Interior Cabinet Secretary also warned that anyone sharing information was being sympathetic to Al-Shabaab. President Uhuru Kenyatta paid tribute to only 4 casualties, despite the fact that many died.
As the Commander-in-Chief, truly I could not be more proud of the men and women in uniform.
Paying tribute to the 4, he said,
"Their bravery is undimmed.
And for this, we as a nation are grateful to all of them." While the president was busy paying tribute to the 4, Kenyans were asking themselves, who are these men in the 4 coffins? How many were they at El-Adde? What about the rest? How many were rescued? The only thing Kenyans got from the government were short answers such as fighting and dying for your country is something one should be proud of. The government later brought in more bodies in coffins and sent them directly to their families. Some people argued that what the government was doing was avoiding accountability, not protecting security. Some argued that the truth of what unfolded at El-Adde was being hidden from Kenyans, not from Al-Shabaab. The silence allowed Al-Shabaab's narrative to go unchallenged. In this case, Al-Shabaab had already achieved its goal. Paul Williams, Associate Professor of International Affairs at George Washington University, who specializes in reporting on peacekeeping missions, condemned Kenya's actions, claiming that silence is not a winning strategy in the world of strategic communications. The government's attempt to control the story ultimately meant it lost control entirely, deepening the tragedy for the families and the nation. Kenya is not the first country to have lost a battle to Al-Shabaab. The US had a similar experience in Somalia in 1993. Following the Black Hawk Down battle, the US government publicly honored its 18 fallen soldiers. They also released a detailed report holding leadership accountable for the operational failures. Kenya did the opposite. No exact number of deaths was given and no one was held to account. So, my question is, does a country's strength come from controlling the narrative or from the courage to be transparent even in defeat? Do you think Kenya should have been honest about the defeat and given a detailed report? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. See you in the next video.